Hello and welcome to a very special program, October 7th, A Lone Soldier's Story featuring Ira Kohler. Thank you everyone for being here, those who are joining us today and those who are viewing this recording. I'm so grateful to see so many new and familiar faces. As always, I got to give a loving shout out to my amazing, wonderful parents, and a very special thank you to all of our guest speakers and presenters, especially today's guest, Ira Kohler, who I'll be introducing to you shortly. I also want to give a shout out to our amazing allies, those who may not identify as Jewish, but definitely have Jewish neshamas, Jewish souls. Those who put so much on the line to fight for the Jewish people, often when we are too scared, too silent, or too busy fighting amongst ourselves. Some are on this Zoom right now and have been so supportive of these programs and our community, and sometimes they feel so alone too, alienated because of their support for us. I have to say thank you to them. Thank you. You mean so much to us, and I really appreciate that you're here. My name is Michael Mantell. I'm a psychotherapist, educator, 3G, the grandchild of Holocaust survivors, and the son of a Sabra, an Israeli. In memory of my grandparents and to combat Jew hatred and Holocaust denial and distortions, I began hosting and producing these programs. In October 2020, with the help of the wonderful Andrea Bolender, I launched the Sundays with Survivors program, the first of which featured Holocaust survivor Irving Roth of blessed memory. Thank God that program was a success. Because of Irving, Andrea, and everyone who attended and supported the efforts, we added more Holocaust education programs, including Mondays Among the Nations, 2G Tuesdays, and 3G Thursdays, because I love alliteration. They featured non-Jewish allies and children and grandchildren of survivors. And I continued adding more programs that cultivate Jewish pride and combat Jew hatred both on and off college campuses. And after October 7th, I continued to add more content relevant to sharing Israel's beautiful story and to combating anti-Israel and anti-Zionist Jew hatred. I am so grateful and proud to say that we are going over 4.5 years strong and counting. Now to introduce Ira Kohler. Ira is a former IDF lone soldier in the Paratrooper Brigade. Originally from Long Island, he was raised in the heart of a strong Jewish community. He graduated from the University of Delaware and several months later moved to Israel. Serving as a lone soldier, Ira enlisted into the 890th Battalion of the Paratrooper Brigade. And today, Ira will be sharing his lone soldier story with us. Throughout the program, we invite you to write your comments or questions in the chat. And at the end, we will open up the program for Q&A. And no matter how incredible these programs are, and thank God they always are, your participation at the end adds so much more meaning and value. At that time, please feel free to raise your virtual hand using the hand raised emoji for me to see and call on you, or unmute yourself to ask your questions directly, or I can share your questions or comments that you write in the chat. If you'd like me to share them, please note that. Otherwise, I will call on you during the Q&A to share your questions. Before we begin, I also want to share a short prayer. May God bless and protect us and the IDF and our soldiers who guard and protect us, Israel and the Jewish people. And may God have mercy on all people in distress or captivity, and may he bring our brothers and sisters out of their suffering and bring them home. With that, I'd like to once again thank you all for being here and your continued support of these programs. And again, thank and welcome Ira Kohler. Ira, the floor is yours.
Michael, thank you so much for the introduction. Everyone can hear me? Thumbs up? Perfect. First, though, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be invited. I know Michael put all this together, and I'm seeing now we have 83 and I think counting on the Zoom, which is amazing. I also love I see many familiar faces. I see my mom and my grandma. I see hi Sandra, Andrea, some other people I recognize and know on the Zoom. It's really a pleasure to be here today. And I'm excited really just to get to share with you a little bit about my story. And so without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get going. You guys can all see? Amazing. So first of all, today's presentation, I'm going to split out into 4 different parts. The first part is going to be a little bit of the background, who I am, where I come from, a little bit just about me. I'm then going to focus mainly today on October 7th, where I was that day and what I was doing. I will then talk a little bit about my time in Gaza. And finally, I'm going to conclude and talk just a brief bit about some of my friends and about some of the hostages and the hostage situation in total. So a little bit about me. I know Michael gave a little bit of a brief introduction. I grew up in Long Island, grew up really in the heart of the Jewish community. I went to the Schechter School of Long Island, which is a strong conservative Jewish day school in Nassau County. I was involved very much growing up in Jewish summer camp in Young Judea, went to Midway Jewish Center, a synagogue, a strong synagogue on Long Island. Loved sports, went to Israel many times as a child. And when I graduated, like Michael said, I went to the University of Delaware. You can see this picture at the top left. And I graduated in 2021 with a degree in economics. And from there, I decided to move to Israel and enlist in the IDF. I moved to Israel in the summer in August of 2021. The term Aliyah, moving to Israel, that is a term when someone decides to immigrate. And I decided for myself that I wanted to serve in the IDF. And to do that, I was going to make Aliyah to move to Israel. And you can see a picture of myself and my siblings on the day I moved to Israel. I went to Israel to serve as a lone soldier. A lone soldier is someone who serves in the Israel Defense Forces that does not have immediate family living in Israel. And there's 2 types of lone soldiers. One type of lone soldier is someone born in Israel, raised in Israel, grown in Israel, that might not have the connection with their family. Maybe they're an orphan. Maybe they were grown up Haredi and their family does not believe in enlisting in the IDF and they decide to enlist and they no longer have the connection with their family. They're also considered a lone soldier. Most lone soldiers, however, and those who you probably have heard of, are individuals who come from throughout the world, who moved to Israel. And since my family and my parents lived in Long Island, and I was living in Israel, serving the IDF, I was considered a lone soldier. And I went through this program called Galin Sadar. You can see here in the picture. Galin Sadar is a lone soldier program that helps individuals like myself move to Israel, absorb into Israeli society, and kind of helps us throughout our entire process, throughout our entire IDF service. So when I moved to Israel, I moved to Kibbutz Erez. So I moved to Kibbutz Erez. Kibbutz Erez is a community right along the Gaza border. You can see from this map here, on the south part of the map, you see the city of Sderot, and this dotted line right there is the Gaza border. Kibbutz Erez is about half a mile from the Gaza border, and my program, Galin Sadar, moved us to this community. And since, like I said, I was considered a lone soldier, we were placed on this kibbutz and given host families. And if you see this picture right here on the right, is a picture of myself with my host family, an amazing, amazing family that really helped me throughout my service, not only hosting me for Shabbat dinners and holiday meals, but also really just holding my hand and being with me throughout my time in Israel, and especially during the war. And this picture you can see right here is a picture of my entire Garin, as we called it, entire group of about 17 North Americans from the United States and Canada. And we all moved to Israel together, all lived in Kibbutz Erez together, and we all decided to enlist in different areas of the IDF. And you can see me all the way on the right. I'm just going to point out the guy next to me standing up. His name is Joe. And me and him actually served in the same unit. And everyone else who was in the picture all went into different areas of the IDF. I then, a few months later, enlisted into the IDF. I enlisted into the 890th Battalion of the Paratrooper Brigade. And I went through training for about 8 months. Training consists of basically turning us from a civilian into, as they say, a chayal, a soldier, and from a chayal to a lochem, from a regular soldier to a combat soldier, to a warrior, basically taking us from civilian to war. That's the whole point of training. And what we do during these 8 months of training is we learn how to fight. We learn how to hold a gun, how to operate a gun, how to shoot a gun. We learn how to fight as a team, as a company, and then as a battalion as a whole. We learn the values of the IDF, how to actually act as a soldier, and also, obviously, as a paratrooper, we learn how to jump from the plane. And I got to 3 times jump from the plane, which were some of the coolest experiences of my life. After those 8 months, we had a ceremony called the Tekes Kumta, or in Hebrew, or in English, the beret ceremony. Basically, it's a way to signify the end of training and say that you're no longer a paratrooper in training. You're now officially a paratrooper serving in the IDF. And after that, we move into our regular active service. And from there, we do two things. We always continue to train, always continue to prepare for war. But we also, for the most part, are sent to different areas of the country, either along the northern borders of Syria or Lebanon, in the south along the Gaza border, or anywhere in the West Bank. And our task is to guard and to protect the country. And this picture on the right, where you see me with the red beret on my head and holding the gun, I was in the city of Hebron, in the southern part of the West Bank, or in Judea and Samaria. And I was there for several months guarding. My service, from the time I started up until October 7th, was a very normal, regular service. And obviously, just like the entire country and the entire army, on October 7th, my story and my service took a change. And so now getting into a little bit of the meat of the presentation here today is my October 7th story. And what's really unique about what happened to me is that my story actually begins the week before October 7th. And the reason is that my battalion was on our base, and we were preparing for what is called the Targad in Hebrew, or in English, a battalion-wide war week, or war test, a war exercise. The entire point of the week is to test our battalion's readiness for war. How ready is the age of 90th Battalion to go into enemy territory and to fight in a war? And it's a test that is so big that it happens once every 8 months, and it's a test split into 2 weeks. The second week is the actual war week itself. It's a week where we're in the fields, operating, actually simulating a war. And the entire week before, our battalion is given a chance to be on our base with no other responsibilities or tasks aside from preparing for a war. We were supposed to go out into the fields and start this war simulation on October 7th in the evening, when Shabbat and the holiday Simchat Torah were supposed to end, literally on the darkest day of the Jewish people. That evening, we were supposed to start a war simulation, which meant, and you probably picked it up by now, that the entire week before, my battalion was on base, and we were preparing for the war simulation itself. We were essentially preparing for a war without actually knowing that a war was happening. And so what do we do during this week? We do several things. The first thing we do is, most importantly, we have our guns, and we make sure our guns work. We take them to the shooting range, make sure they operate as they should, and then we take our guns back to base and we clean them really, really well to make sure there's no like schmutz, no black residue inside. If you see this picture in the middle, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but this gun that I have is it's called the Negev, which is an Israeli-made machine gun. Most people in my unit had what's called the M4 rifle, which is a semi-automatic weapon actually made here in the United States in Connecticut. My gun was a little bit special. I was given a machine gun, which is an automatic weapon. And the difference is that when I click the trigger, many bullets go out, aside from clicking the trigger and one bullet going out. And this is my specialty on the team. And you can see all these bullets there was the amount of bullets I had to have, which was exactly 760 bullets, which is no small amount. The next thing we do is we make sure that all of our equipment is up to standard. You could see on this picture on the left with my entire team. On the right, this mat is my equipment. We make sure that our equipment is ready to go. Everything from our helmet to our knee pads to our vest to our bag, to our ammunition, to our water, to our extra clothes, to our food, everything is ready to go. The entire week before October 7th, this is what we were doing. And when October 7th came, we were as ready as ever without actually knowing that a real war was happening. So moving a little bit ahead, where exactly were we in the country, right? This is the state of Israel. Right over here, you can see circled is the Gaza Strip. I'm pointing right over here to where our base was. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Right over here on the left, you can see the city of Jerusalem. This blue area on the right is the Dead Sea. This entire open area in the middle, where you could see nothing, it's Judean desert. This is Route 1, right, connecting Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and then Jerusalem to the Dead Sea. Right below Route 1, in the middle of the Judean desert, sits our base, the Nedi Musa training base, literally in the middle of nowhere. The only things there are soldiers like myself, camels, Bedouins, and sand. That's the environment. We're on this base. It's October 6th in the evening. We're all ready to go for the next day. And we're given a day of rest. It's Shabbat. It's the holiday of Simchat Torah. We have no responsibilities on base. And we're given a day to rest. That evening is a huge party. We're doing the hakafot, right? The dancing with the Torahs. I got 300 guys on this base. I'm sure you guys can imagine the scene. We go to bed that night, and the next morning, I have my phone by my bedside, and my phone starts buzzing, and I see here buzz, 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 and I pick up my phone, and I start scrolling, and I see incoming alerts. I see alerts of incoming rockets. Alerts of incoming rockets. I keep scrolling, and I try and find kibbutz errors, and I tell myself at a certain point, there's always rockets that come into Israel. We know this. I need to try to go back to bed, because that evening we're about to start a week in the fields without, a lot of rest, without a lot of sleep. I need to get some rest. I try to go back to bed, and about 10, 15 minutes later, one of our commanders enters into the room, and he quickly gets us up, and he says to us, we don't know what's happening, that there's a situation in the south. There's a lot of rockets coming into Israel, and the only thing we know right now is that we need to be ready. And so at that moment, we get all of our stuff together, and we make our way outside our base, eventually, with all of our equipment, and we're told that helicopters are going to come. Eventually, helicopters arrive. These 4 helicopters come to our base. These huge helicopters called Yasur helicopters. These types of helicopters are meant for transportation purposes only, literally to bring soldiers from point A to point B. This specific class called the Yasur, right, like I said, were used in the early wars of the country, specifically in the Yom Kippur War. They're helicopters that, if you see in the front, has the cockpit, and in the back is like the main area of the helicopter. It's supposed to fit about 30 soldiers in the back. On that day, there were about 4 helicopters that arrived with just over 200 soldiers that had to be moved from our base in the Judean desert all the way towards the Gaza Envelope. They fit about 200 soldiers into each one of these helicopters. And you can see right over here, there's a bench on the side. Right over there, there's another bench. And this area in the middle is like an aisle, like an alleyway. And they literally squeezed as many soldiers as they could fit one on top of the other. And this, you can see circled, that's me from that morning. My legs were cramped, not able to really move at all. I had my bag in between my legs and my gun resting on my 2 legs. We were sitting there waiting to lift off, and eventually the propellers started to go, and we were on our way. We flew over Jerusalem, and we went towards the Gaza region. And one of the questions that I usually get asked is, people say to me, well, Ira, we knew that on October 7th, that Hamas did not just attack Israel at one point along the Gaza border. We knew that it wasn't just one of the kibbutzim or one of the communities along the, next to Gaza that was under attack. Rather, the entire border was breached. The entire first line of communities and many communities far deeper into Israel were under attack. And so the question was, well, where exactly were you going? You couldn't just go to one spot, right? And so the thing with this question is it shows 2 things. One, it shows the extent of Hamas's attack, that it wasn't just one location, it wasn't just one squad of terrorists, rather it was thousands of terrorists at many different spots. So the other thing it shows is that from the IDF perspective, our understanding of the situation and our goal of where we were going, our target, where we were going, changed throughout the day. And my story really symbolizes just that, because when we were hearing that morning that there was a war and that we were heading towards the Gaza Envelope, we were told at first that we were most probably going up here to Netiv HaSarah, which I circled. Netiv HaSarah is a moshav on the northern border of the Gaza Strip. Netiv HaSarah was one of the first communities hit that day. Many of the first terrorists, especially those on paragliders, if you guys know those videos of Hamas paragliders going over the border, many of those went into Netiv HaSarah. For reference, you can see right over here is Kibbutz Be'eri, just to get an understanding of where I thought we were going and where I lived. I knew exactly where Natidah Asara was. We were told that we're going to Kibbutz Saad, and then on the helicopter we were told that we're going right over here to Nachalos. Nachalos is a kibbutz very much along the Gaza border. Right next to the kibbutz of Nachalos is the military outpost, the military base of Nachalos. Both from the base and the community itself, there were many, many people killed. There were many people taken hostage, especially on the military outpost right over here of Nachalos. It's where those 5 female soldiers were taken hostage that came back. Also, many hostages that are still there now, including Matan Angrest, who was still there and presumably alive. He was taken from the outpost right over there. And when we were on the helicopter, we were told, and we thought we were going over here. And then what ended up happening, and I only learned this later, when there was an interview done with the pilot, he was saying to the interviewer that morning, as they were flying to Nachalos, and as they were approaching the region, he looked down in the area, and he says to his co-pilot that there's something odd going down below. He sees a circulation of people on the ground, and he says to his co-pilot, this doesn't make sense. He knew at that moment that Israelis in the Gaza Envelope region, right? They were told to go into their shelters, to go into their safe rooms, to close the doors, to lock the front door, to close the blinds, to turn off the lights, and they were told not to open the door for anyone because not only there are rockets, but there's terrorists circulating the area. And so when he saw a movement of people down below around Nachalos, he knew there was something off. And as they got closer, he saw people with guns, with weaponry on mopeds, and he says to his co-pilots, these are terrorists, 100%. We can't land next to Nachalos because it's a helicopter. We're a target. If we land right next to where terrorists are, we could be under attack right away. And so he decides to turn around and that our new location will be right over here. You can see this road is called Route 232, and we're supposed to land right across the street from Kibbutz Alumin. This road became very infamous on October 7th because further down along the road, you get to Kibbutz Be'eri, and right over there, south of Be'eri, where I'm pointing to, is where the Northern Music Festival site was. And along this road right here is where that infamous video cameras of cars, burnt cars on the side of the road. And so that area became a very iconic and devastating area from October 7th. And we, at that moment, our projected target, landing target, we're supposed to be right over here across the road. So we're on the helicopter and we're in the back, right? We were sitting down, and at a certain point, there's helicopter crew members that have a walkie-talkie device that are communicating with the cockpit, and they tell us at a certain point to all stand up, and they say, in a moment, we're going to land. When we land, we need to exit the helicopter as quickly as possible because the helicopter is a target. They say if the helicopter sits there too long, it could be under attack, which I mentioned earlier. So what do? We all stood up. Those benches that line the sides actually folded up like this. We stood up, the benches folded up, and we were holding onto handles along the interior of the helicopter. And moments later, as we're standing up, we hear a huge boom hit the side of the helicopter. The entire thing shook completely. We all fell to the ground. We were hit by a Hamas rocket. It felt like an earthquake. We fell to the ground, and as we start to try and stand up, the helicopter crew members screamed at us to stay close to the ground because there were these windows that lined the helicopter, and those windows were now being hit by bullets, and the same terrorists that shot a rocket towards us were now shooting gunfire that were hitting the exterior of the helicopter, and some of them were hitting the windows and were basically now entryways into which bullets were entering in. And we stayed really, really close to the ground. And in those moments, that pilot, still operating, still flying the helicopter, ended up being a hero, and for two main reasons. First of all, he understood we were hit, obviously, and he realized that one of the engines failed and the other one was still working, which means that first engine was either directly hit by a bullet or by the rocket, or it was affected in the hit. However, he understood that with only one engine working, that an emergency landing was imminent, and he decided in that moment that we're going to be landing in that open field no matter what. The second thing that he did, even more heroic and most proudly saved all of our lives, was as bullets were heading our way, there's a mechanism to just drop to release the gas tank of on the helicopter. And so he just dropped the gas tanks, and God forbid if a bullet penetrated into one of the tanks and hit the gasoline, the entire thing could have exploded. So he drops the gas tanks in this open field, and moments later, we land. The time is around 11:40 a.m. It's October 7th, and we land in this open field at around where I have this pin right here. And when we land, the helicopter crew tries to open the back door. They're not able to. They try to do it electronically. It's not working. So they have to pull open these latches to just hydraulically just drop the back door. And we run outside then with our huge army bags, and we sprint out onto the field right over here. And the terrorists that were shooting our way were along the road, Route 232, and a little bit inside this kibbutz of Alumin. And they're shooting in our direction as we run out into the field. We take our huge bags filled with all their equipment. We place them onto the ground. And from there, we get behind them. We put our weapons right next to them, and we start returning with fire as the terrorists along the road are shooting our way. Those bags ended up being lightsabers. They were the only sort of protection we had. We were completely exposed. We were in a dirt field, no trees to get behind, no rocks, no nothing, no buildings, completely dirt fields. The only thing we had were those bags. And in fact, several days later, after the Balagan of October 7th and the days after, several of my friends actually found bullet holes, and some of them even bullets inside those bags, which means without a doubt that in this situation, as we were lining there behind those bags, that they ended up being really lightsabers. And God forbid if we didn't have those to protect ourselves, that bullets could have hit some of my friends and obviously not been stopped by the bags themselves. We were in this field for about 15 minutes in a gun battle, literally shooting back and forth with these terrorists. And eventually, as it started to die down, we were told to move to this area down below. And the reason is, you can see on the bottom there, it's a little forest area with trees, and there were rocks there too to get behind. And for us, it was a much safer area to be. And when we eventually made our way there, the situation was a lot calmer. The craziest thing that happened in this entire situation, and I only wait till now so I could show some of the pictures and video, is that when we left the helicopter, I mentioned earlier that the helicopter is a target. And if, God forbid, the helicopter stays in this area for too long, it could be under attack. And when we let the helicopter and we're in this open field returning with fire, moments after we leave, we hear another whoosh and a huge boom. And at that moment, we see to our right a helicopter up in flames. Our helicopter was hit a second time. This time, the rocket hit the center of the helicopter, and we saw to our right this. And you could see the helicopter completely on fire. And this is what it looked like afterwards. There was nothing left. After the fire, really the only thing remaining was the skeleton, was the framework of the helicopter itself. You could see a few things in this picture that I just want to point out. First of all, obviously, the elephant in the picture is the helicopter itself. This picture was taken only several days after October 7th, so you really get an understanding of what the landscape looked like. These trees in the background, if you could see them, is actually where the road was. So just to get an understanding of the distance between where we were and the road, was about 150, 200 meters away. Just get some sort of understanding of how far the terrorists were that we were shooting at. The main thing I really want to point out in this picture is you can see the field. It's dirt. It's flat. There's nothing there. We were exposed completely. When we were in this gun battle, whenever a bullet would hit the ground, we'd see like a little poof of dirt go in the air, which for us was obviously beyond scary because we were in the desert throughout our service, shooting in shooting ranges. And you saw whenever you shot a bullet at a shooting range, it would hit the dirt and you see little poofs of, dust and dirt go into the air. To see all of that all around us was beyond frightening. And you can obviously see the field we were in. We were definitely in the worst situation that a soldier would want to ever be in. Completely open and completely exposed. This picture I just want to point out, you can see obviously the helicopter in the background, but these are actually the gas tanks that the pilot dropped. These are the gas tanks that if held gasoline, and if a bullet went into it, the entire thing could explode. Before I move on, I want to show you guys this video to really just pinpoint the timestamps of what was happening and to kind of put everything in perspective. And really, after you see this video, you'll understand how lucky my unit was, and really how fortunate we were.
מסוק יסעור שמתפוצץ על הקרקע כשהם...
So, you guys all see, I just paused. You guys all can see the screen? Thumbs up? Perfect. So just a few things to point out. First of all, this, give me a second. Few things to point out. First of all, this is obviously security footage cam. It was taken from Kibbutz Be'eri across the street from where we landed. You can see the timestamp, October 7th, 2023, Saturday, 11:39 and 23 seconds. At this time, you could see we're in the middle of the circle. This is our helicopter, still here at 11:39 and 23 seconds, still in the air. Fast forward 7 minutes later.
רגע לפני היו בתוכו 50 לוחמים של צנחנים, נזכיר, הם...
Look at the timestamp now.
Sorry?
One second. Sorry.
מסוק יסעור שמתפוצץ על הקרקע כשהם ממש רגע לפני היו בתוכו 50 לוחמים של צנחנים, נזכיר.
So look at that. That was 11:39 and 23 seconds. Right now, 11:42 and 7 seconds, just under 3 minutes later. And if you look right over here closely, you're about to see a huge explosion. If you guys see that. And so what does that mean? At 11:39, my helicopter was still in the air, about to land. Less than 3 minutes later, our helicopter had to not only land, but had to get all the soldiers out and safely. And only after, thank God, the last soldier left the helicopter did that second rocket come. And to understand even more, this is a miracle. If even that second rocket came 30 seconds earlier, or it took, say, 30 seconds longer for our unit to lead the helicopter, the situation would have ended significantly differently. And just, I'm sure you guys are all wondering, was anyone hurt in this whole story? Thankfully, not a single person was killed. And there were 2 people who were injured that I know, one of which was the pilot, that when he was leaving the helicopter, he was actually shot in the leg, and he's now more than fine. And the other one was my friend Joe, who I pointed out in the beginning. He's also a lone soldier. He grew up in Texas, and he's now back in Texas. He's actually visiting Israel now, but he's back in Texas in school, in grad school. He was there that day, and in the field, he's a big guy. He was shot when he was laying down through the shoulder and through the chin, and he went through many, many operations, and is doing more than fine now. He's completely healthy and doing well. And thankfully, like I said, not a single person was killed, and those who were injured were able to recover as they should. Moving forward a little bit. After all that situation, we were gathered in the forest area, and we were told at a certain point, as we were waiting there, stand up, we're walking south. We don't know where we're going. And they say, we're going to a kibbutz. We don't know where, we don't know what the situation is. And our rationale, our thoughts in the moment is, okay, we're going to enter into a kibbutz. We're going to scan the area, making sure that there's no terrorists there, that all the people are safe. Then we'll protect the civilians, and then that would be it. We didn't obviously understand what we were getting into. We walked about 3 kilometers south, and probably the longest walk of my life. And then we arrived to Kibbutz Be'eri around 1:30 in the afternoon on October 7th. And we get to this kibbutz, and we enter in the front gate, which is right over there we're encircling. We enter into this community, and as we enter in, was really the first time that I started to understand that maybe what we're about to enter into is a little bit different than what I originally thought. And because as we entered in, the sounds of gunfire that I heard throughout my entire 3-kilometer walk down, the sounds of gunfire started to really get louder and louder. But more than that, as we entered in, to our left, we saw some bodies on the ground. And this is a picture of my pluga, of my company, entering into the kibbutz that morning. And if you see right over here, there were several bodies lying on the ground. I didn't look to see if they were Jewish bodies, if they were Israeli, or if they were terrorists. I really walked in, saw that on my left, understood that what we were walking into was definitely different than what we expected. And from there, we continued on, and we eventually made it to this area of the kibbutz. This area is where the kindergartens are. And that morning, the terrorists decided that that area was going to be a major hotspot where they were going to locate themselves. The main reason is that the kindergartens are where children go throughout the week. But this was Saturday morning. This was Shabbat. It was a holiday. There was no kindergarten. There was no school in session. These areas had no people in it. It was a perfect area for terrorists to locate themselves. But obviously, I didn't know this at the time. And we walked in, and we eventually made it to this area of the kibbutz. Right across the street that you could see encircling here was a kindergarten. Right next to it, across the road, was another kindergarten. We make it up to this concrete wall. This like half concrete wall. Where on the other side, you can see there's garbage cans. We get down, we get behind it, kneel down. I have my gun perched on the ledge. The only thing really exposed above is my neck up. And moments later, I see this guy sprint outside of the kindergarten, grab the bag, and sprint back inside. This guy's wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, and I had my gun on him, like my scope pointing in direction. And in that moment, I decide not to shoot. I see a guy, no gun on him, no nothing, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, grabs a duffel bag, sprints back inside the kindergarten. And in my mind, in that split moment, all I could think about is what my commander says to us as we walk inside the kibbutz. He says to us, we need to be careful. We're not entering into Gaza, we're not entering into Lebanon, we're not entering into enemy territory. We're fighting an enemy force in their area. We're entering into an Israeli community where not only are there the IDF forces there, and not only are there terrorists, but also there are police officers. There's the kibbutz's own security squad, and most importantly of all, this community at around 1:32 o'clock on October 7th is completely filled with Israeli civilians, and we need to make sure that we be very, very careful in how we operate. And so when I see this guy run outside in sweatpants and a t-shirt, grab a duffel bag and sprint inside, I decided not to shoot. And moments later, himself and whatever other terrorists are inside that building start to shoot in our direction. And I got down below this half concrete wall. And I realized, obviously, in that moment, that was a terrorist. And why do I share this story? For several reasons. First of all, I want to show the complexity of fighting in the kibbutz that day. That it wasn't just us fighting in Gaza, where it's us and Hamas. We're fighting amongst Israeli civilians. The other reason that I want to share this story is that Hamas's tactics, which we've known throughout the war, which we've known throughout their entire existence, and which we know specifically from October 7th, is that their goal is to blend in as much as possible with the Israeli people. By wearing civilian clothing, they're able to do that. Other ways they did this was many of them had shirts with Hebrew lettering on it. Many of them decided to go into Israel that day wearing T-shirts with Israel lettering, Hebrew lettering, to try and disguise themselves. And even more so, several terrorists found inside homes uniforms, IDF uniforms, and they decided to get into IDF uniforms and then go back outside and fight. And for obviously a soldier, that's the most confusing of all, because you see someone in a uniform and you think that's an Israeli, obviously. We were stationed behind this concrete wall for about an hour and a half. And many things happened. The other story that I'll share now is that at a certain point, the commander of my company decided to send a squad across the street because we knew that there was something fishy going on right over here that I'm pointing to. I'm going to zoom in right over here. This is like a little children's playground. And my commander decided to send a squad across the street, and they make it right below this wall. And I, at that moment, I'm still back here across the street, and I'm looking out in the area, and I see this guy, this terrorist, in this little playground area, lying down behind these like children's toys, hiding from us. And I see a hand go up in the air, throws a grenade over his head, goes over the fence, and it goes towards my friends, and they see it right away, and they quickly retreat. Really quickly retreat. And myself and my other friends who are across the street here decide then to fire in the direction where we saw the terrorists. And you could see along, I don't know if you guys could see these little columns, if you see these little holes, this was most probably, or definitely in part, from the bullets that we were firing in this direction. And if you see this guy on the right, this guy is from Kibbutz Be'eri. He took me around a few months later to really show me around the community, for me to be able to piece together what I did and where I was that day, and also for us to really share short stories with each other. And this is me obviously telling him what happened here, where these bullet holes are from, and all of that. So as the day went on, the situation in the kibbutz changed a lot. My battalion, like I said, we were the 890th Battalion of the Paratrooper Brigade. We ended up being, and I only learned this later, we ended up being the first major unit, IDF unit, to arrive and to enter the kibbutz that day. We ended up being very important in the sense that before we arrived, there were obviously many members of the kibbutz's own security team. There were police officers there, and there were some small IDF special forces teams, which consisted of about 10 to 15 soldiers. When we entered into the community, that afternoon, we ended up being the first major force that arrived. But as the day went on, many more IDF forces came to the Gaza Envelope region. Many more were able to enter inside Kibbutz Be'eri. And especially as we got into the evening, there were many, many special forces teams there. And most importantly, there were tanks. And when that happened, our team and our company, our battalion, was told that from now on, for the next many hours, the tanks and the special forces will be engaging with the terrorists in location that we know that where they're at. And what our responsibility, amongst many other teams, will be to rescue families until the last family of the kibbutz is brought outside. And so we made it to this house that I'm pointing to there. And this house became our home base, where we would rescue families, bring them here, and from there we would protect them until we were able to bring them outside the kibbutz. And the way we rescue families was quite interesting, and that's what I really want to highlight, because as I mentioned earlier, right, families were told to go inside their safe rooms, to close the doors, to lock the front door, to not open the door for anyone. So the question is, well, what happens when you're an Israeli soldier entering into a house trying to rescue a family? You can't just knock on the door and say, we're here to rescue you. They're not going to answer. So we literally would go to people's homes, knock down the front door, literally like kick it open. Sometimes we even had to go through the window because we couldn't get the front door down, so we'd break the window. And we get to the shelter, to the safe room within the house. Every Israeli home, especially in the Gaza envelope, has a safe room made completely of concrete to protect from incoming rockets. And on October 7th, also from terrorists, we went to the door of the safe room, and through the door, we had to convince the family that we are here to rescue them. We had to tell them that we're the IDF, what unit we're in. We told them to please open the door. And the last thing that we did was open the door for them. And there were two main reasons why. The first reason is that we didn't want to startle them. We knew that they were scared, and we didn't want to abruptly open the door and startle them and scare them. Mainly, though, we wanted to protect ourselves because many Israeli families on October 7th, if they had a pistol, if they had a knife, if they had any sort of last-ditch sort of thing that they can have inside their safe room, they brought it in. And if we were going to open the door for them abruptly, and they were scared and threatened, we were worried that they might use that against us. And so we allowed them to open the door. And we convinced them that we are the good people. And so I want to show you guys this video. It's a video taken from the house in the security footage where you could see my team. I'm not pictured in this video, but you could see my team taking out a family. You'll see on the bottom the timestamp. You'll see a girl coming out, a little girl, and then her father, another little kid, and the mother in the background. So who's
כולם מוכנים. תצאו משם לבדיקה. יאללה בואו אחרינו. יאללה אושי. יאללה תביאו אותם.
See here. And so this is what it would look like. This is obviously a very calm situation. This family came out right away, but you heard who's here, IDF. They said Tzanchanim, the paratroopers. They said, come after us. There's families outside. We're going to take you guys. And then you see this family come outside, and from there they were brought to safety. I ended up spending about 3 days inside the kibbutz, inside Be'eri. I ended up leaving the kibbutz only on Tuesday morning, which is October 10th, which is about 3 days later. I was there through Sunday, through Monday, and then obviously like into Tuesday. I'm not going to get into everything that I was doing throughout those 3 days because we'd be here for a long time. I just want to show you guys a few things to point out before I move on. First thing is this diagram that you can see in this picture was taken from the IDF incident report done about a year ago. It shows the shaded red areas where terrorists were. The red dots is where a murder took place. Yellow is where there was a kidnapping, and orange where there was both. A few things to point out. First of all, in this shaded red area in the middle, this like standalone area, is where the kindergartens are. That's where a lot of the fighting was, that I was a part of in the early hours that I arrived to the kibbutz. And the second thing I want to point out is in this area on the left side of the kibbutz, where you see a lot of dots, that's where really a majority of the fighting was, and where I was operating mainly on October 8th, that Sunday, and on October 9th, that Monday. And only on October 9th in the morning were we able to officially confirm that there were no more terrorists in the kibbutz. The last terrorist was eliminated on Monday morning, October 9th, which means that it took about 2 days to finally clear the kibbutz of Hamas. So going to move on a little bit, a few weeks later, I ended up entering into the Gaza Strip. I ended up spending just over 100 days inside, from the north to the central to the south. I'm not going to get into everything I did because we'd really be here until, we'd be here for 100 days. Really my goal is I want to highlight a little bit about what our time in Gaza looked like, and I'm going to do it through several videos. What we would do, what was our goal? Our goal was to enter into different regions of the Gaza Strip, to cleared areas, to look for terrorists, to look for terrorist infrastructure, to look for maybe any sort of intelligence that could lead us towards hostages or any other terrorist or terrorist infrastructure, and then to move on. I spent about a month in Gaza City. I got 2.5 weeks, almost 3 weeks in Sajaya, which is right across the border from Nahal Oz. I got 2.5 weeks in the central camps of Gaza, and then almost a month and a half in the south in Khan Yunis. I want to show you guys this first video, which is a video taken from the body cam, from my GoPro that I brought into Gaza. The reason I want to show this video is because I want to show you guys exactly how we clear out a building, how we go into a room. Just the talk, you'd hear the Hebrew, how we clear a room searching for terrorists. Our goal was to look for any terrorists, and then afterwards to come back and look for any terrorist infrastructure, whether that be tunnels, guns, explosives, rockets, anything like that. So this footage, by the way, is on me. So the gun you'll see is on me, and you'll also hear my voice.
Lucky. יאללה, אני ואתה עכשיו רצים. באנו לפתוח? כן, לפתוח? עכשיו רצים על הסטריפ הזה, רוץ, מוסר. אני איתך. אם אני אומר, אני המשך, אתה דוקר. אתה לא סיים מספר, אני מידי. במקביל, אני תקשיב, תקשיב, מגרים למקביל, הבא. מעולה. יש. הבא. מעולה, יש לך ללמוד את הדלת?
And so this is how it would look like. We'd go room by room, clearing a building. This is in Khan Yunis, in the south of the Gaza Strip. Sometimes we wouldn't find anything, and sometimes we would. And I want to show you guys one example of something that we found. It was probably the biggest thing that our battalion found. Back in November 2023, when we were operating in Gaza City, in the neighborhood of Zaytun, we ended up entering into a mosque. And in the mosque, we found a whole Hamas center, a whole Hamas headquarters. Literally, the ground level was a mosque. Looks like a mosque. I'm sure it acted like a mosque. Below the mosque, in the basement, literally take stairs down, was a whole area where Hamas was operating from. There was a weapons storage room. There was an entrance to a tunnel. There was a laboratory for Hamas. And this video really shows everything. It's in Hebrew, but has English subtitles at the bottom. But really the visuals are the most important thing.
אנחנו נכנסים כרגע למסגד, שבו נמצא מתחת למסגד בקומת מרתף, מחסן, אמל"ח ומעבדה של רקטות של החמאס, ומלא מלא מטענים וחומרי חבלה וחומרי נפץ.
אנחנו לוחמי גדוד של 790 של הצנחנים, ביחד עם כוחות הנדסה מיוחדים, נמצאים מתחת למסגד בלב העיר עזה, נמצאה פה מעבדה של רקטות מיוחדת של החמאס, שמראה איך החמאס משתמש במסגדים לרצח נשים וילדים.
אפשר לראות את כמות האמל"ח הבלתי נתפסת שהאויב מחביא פה.
במהלך הפשיטה בקומת המרתף מצאנו חדר דקירות בלוקים שהפשיט אותנו, עוד קצת דקירות הבלוקים, באמת גילינו מעבדה לייצור אמל"ח של החמאס, ופיר שמוביל את בית התת-קרקעי. החמאס הסתיר את הפס ייצור הזה בתוך המסגד. אפשר לראות את הסימנים של הפיצוץ. אחר שפוצצנו את הקירות, התגלנו לשתי דברים, אחד מהם זה פיר, עומק משהו כמו 5 מטר, שנמצא ממש פה מתחת למסגד, פה במרתף שלו, זה מה שנמצא כחלק מהפשיטה.
פה אפשר לראות על הלוח את הסרטוטים של הרקטות.
ובחדר הזה ניתן לי ממש לראות המון חלקים של ייצור אמל"ח, פה פצמ"רים, נשקים טרמוברים, RPG.
Obviously, that video is a lot, and you see many things. You see entrance to a tunnel. You see there's a room with the Hamas emblem on the wall, and then down below you see a bunch of weapon parts and weapons. This area was clearly used for military purposes. It was obviously a very clear example of Hamas using their civilian infrastructure for military purposes. So also it was very fulfilling in the sense that, you know, you operate in Gaza for a long time, and to find things like this and to know that this is going to help Israel really makes us feel like our work is going somewhere. And more than that, we actually had radios in Gaza that we'd listen to the news. And for us, it was really our only connection to the outside world. We didn't have phones, we didn't have our, iPhones to, look at YouTube or whatever. And the next day, as we're listening to the radio, we hear them talking about the news, talking about how our battalion found this in a mosque. And to hear that on the news the next day, really, I think, for our team, for our battalion, it gave us not only pride, but a lot of fulfillment, knowing that the work we're doing is really is going somewhere. So, like I said, I was in Gaza for just over 100 days. I was supposed to finish my service in January of 2024. I decided to stay on a little bit longer. My mother loved that. And I decided to finally finish my service in the middle of March of 24. And there's a tradition in the IDF where when you finish your service, you cut up your military ID card. And a little feel-good video before we move on. So a little quick video of me cutting up my card, officially ending my service. I threw my scissors in the air, celebrating. From there, I was a 3-man. So I obviously did my regular service, I finished, and then I did reserve duty for that 2.5 months. Before I finish here today, I just want to briefly touch on a few things. And first, and most importantly, I want to talk about some of my friends. I always think that the best way to commemorate, to remember those who have lost, to share their stories, and because their stories will live on. And I want to share just a little bit about Yair Avitan. Yair was a friend of mine from my unit. We served in the same team together, and he was really the joy and the smile of my team. He always had a smile on his face. He wasn't like the typical Israeli rough on the outside. He was soft on the outside and soft on the inside. We became really good friends, where he became the type of friend where we hung out, not only in the army, but outside the army. The year before, during Yom Ha'atzmaut, we hung out together. We always had the type of relationship where just joke around with one another. This picture you can see right here was taken from mid-June of 2024. It was a few months after I finished my service. I was in Israel, and we decided to go to a friend's house, and we hung out together, had a barbecue. We were watching a movie. We were just having a good time. We were outside. About a week later, Yair entered back into Gaza with many of my friends. They went to Sajaya, and that day, as they were entering in, they entered into a house, and Yair ended up being shot there. He ended up being the only person who was killed in the incident, and he ended up being, I'll say, thankfully, the only person in my company that we've lost since the start of the war. He's someone who, like I said, always has a smile on his face, and we know always continues to have a smile on his face, and that we remember, and that is looking down on us as we're here today. So just a little bit about Yair. And the next person I want to share about, and I'm sure many of you guys have heard of, is Omer Nutra. Omer is a friend of mine from my hometown in Plainview, Long Island. We grew up together, going to the same synagogue, the same school, even briefly to the same summer camp. He was really, in the truest sense, a childhood friend and a family friend of mine. We both decided after graduating high school, obviously I went to college first, we decided to both move to Israel and enlist in the IDF. I to the paratroopers, he to the tank unit. He became a commander, and then he became an officer. And on October 7th, Omer was stationed along the Gaza border. His tank was one of the first under attack, and himself and his other tank soldiers were all taken hostage into Gaza. It was 422 days that the entire world fought for him to come back alive, and only then do we find out that he was unfortunately killed on October 7th itself. There was a brief sense of relief to know that he was not suffering all this time. And with that, there was also the understanding that he would not come back as we thought. and yet the fight is still going on. His parents are everywhere. I think they're in DC right now. They're traveling the world. Israel, DC, you name it, still fighting for their son to come back for a proper burial. Oner was a childhood friend, like I said. We grew up playing basketball together, playing sports, swimming in their pool. Bringing him home for the burial, just like the other that 30 deceased hostages deserved, is beyond important. And with that, to bring home every single hostage, all those living and all those who are not. So with that, and before I conclude here today, I just want to say that I hope you guys enjoyed my story. I know it was a pretty packed story. I also see there's things in the chat. I'm sure you guys have questions. I am in the process of writing a book, and it's been coming a long way. And I want you guys to be able to have the chance to read it when the book comes out. And so there's no release date yet. There's no information, but I want you guys to be able to be in the loop. So if you guys want to scan this barcode to be able to just fill out to give your contact information, that when I have more information that I'll be able to let you guys know. I'm also right after this going to text the link in the chat right before the questions, so you guys can also fill it out that way. And with that, I know we're going to get into questions. I want to thank you guys all.
Thank you, Ira. Thank you for your service in the IDF. Thank you for what you're doing now by sharing your story. It's so moving and beautiful, and I think it really adds so much to all of us. It's very important for us to know about your story, but also those who can't share their stories with us anymore. So thank you so much. Incredibly moving. You're an incredible storyteller as well. You're able to tell your story with some humor, but also just captivates us. So thank you. I'll start with some questions, but as always, I say that this is so much more beautiful if everybody joins by asking questions. So far, I'm just hearing so many thank yous for your service and your beautiful presentation. So I think we all feel that way. I'll start us off, but I know that we already have a few from the chat and a few people who just raised their hands. So just, Ira, to start us off, you moved to Israel to serve in the IDF right after you graduated. So what led to that decision? How did you come to do that? And also, you know, you're very young. I believe your parents are here, so I was going to ask you this, but maybe I can ask them. What was it like to have their son far away as a lone soldier?
Yeah, my mom, my dad, and my sister are on this, and my dad. There's nothing my dad likes more than being put on the spot. So, but I won't do that. So, you know, I think many people ask this question. This question is often asked a lot, and people oftentimes expect like this spur of the moment, like you know, this spark moment where, you know, I went on Dirt and I saw the code seller and like I knew. My story wasn't, my motivation wasn't like that. What I usually say is, and really because it's all I could say, is that it was everything that kind of led me to this decision was a fabric of just who I am as a person and everything I grew up knowing and loving. I grew up, you know, loving Judaism and loving Israel and understanding that Israel is not just a country for the Israeli citizens, it's a country for Jews worldwide. It's a country that's going to protect Jews no matter where we are in the world. And for me, also meeting and knowing so many Israelis who served in the IDF and knowing that they had to and I didn't, you know, gave me more motivation to say, like, if that's going to be our country too, I want to serve. And from the selfish reason, what kind of drove me from there to go is that I wanted that experience for myself. I wanted the Israeli experience of going to the IDF, to putting on the boots, to knowing it's like. You know, I didn't want a war. I didn't expect the war to come, but you know, war came, and I knew also with signing up for it that I was signing up to always prepare myself that in the case that a war happens, I'm there. And little did I know when the war actually happened when I was there, but that's everything I kind of grew up loving and knowing and loving really propelled me in that direction. So yeah, it's a good question. I see Sasha has a question. I see Steve has his hand up.
Yeah, maybe
Lynn, how do you start? I don't
yeah,
know.
Lindley. So maybe actually, if you guys don't mind, Steve had a question that he shared before. I'd love for Steve to share, and then we'll go to Lindley and Sasha.
All right, thanks, Steve. Steve, you're on mute.
So
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I was a volunteer lone doctor in the Yom Kippur War, and I was taken in by the hospital director's family. I found that to be incredibly helpful to me for the casualties I was seeing. Could you talk about the family that took you in and how you found that relationship?
First of all, that's amazing. You say you're a lone doctor. What does that mean? That means like you went to you went to volunteer in the Yom Kippur War as a doctor?
Yes, I was at University Hospital. I'm from Freeport, Long Island. I was at University Hospital, newly board certified. The Yom Kippur War broke out. I dropped everything, got on a plane, and I was assigned to Sherry Tzedek Hospital. I replaced, they had lost their radiologists, and I was just working like 24/7. And it was amazing. But the hospital director's family, David Mayer's family, took me in. That support basically sustained me because I was seeing really bad casualties. And I was just asking for you to explain your relationship with your family and how important that is for us lone doctors, soldiers. That's all.
First of all, thank you. Michael, I think I found your August speaker. I'm sure he can share a lot of awesome stories. That really, thank you. I actually, that's incredible. I grew up reading stories and books about the Yom Kippur War. So, and obviously all the wars of Israel's history. So, yes, really, thank you for that. My host family was incredible. And I see them nodding their head. They're first of all the cutest family. They're two little kids, Noah and Omer. Then the picture in the beginning that I'm sure you saw, they were 2 and 6 years old. Now they're 5 and 9. So unfortunately, they're getting older. What can I say? From the moment I met them, they were just a word in this family. Every Shabbat, they cook this. They're Moroccan. I don't know how much you guys understand like Israeli food culture. Moroccans are known as like the best. Everything. My host mom doesn't go to restaurants because as she says, I can cook better than them. Why would I go to, my mom goes to restaurants. My host mom, but my mom's a really good cook now. But like they were so warm, so amazing. More than that, though, when the war started, they were such a bridge for my family. I think even helped my family, like my family back home, more than me, because we had so many group chats that I didn't have my phone that my parents were a part of to really know what was happening with me. All these group chats are in Hebrew, a million texts a day, not understanding. For my parents to have, my host family acted as my real parents in these group chats, always asked on me, always were able to connect to my parents, tell them like Ira's fine, back in America. We even were able to call home and sometimes in Gaza. And because I couldn't call, we had these dumb phones. I'm too young. I'm 25, so I don't know what a flip phone is. But I'm sure many of you guys, we had these flip phones where like you literally flip it and you dial a number. I see a bunch of nods. And I couldn't call an American number. So what I would do, I would call my host dad on the number, and then they would call on WhatsApp my parents back in America, and they put the phones together, and that's how I was able to call. They were on top of everything. When I had breaks in Gaza, they would come visit me wherever I was in the country. They would buy me things for no reason, just as like a thank you. They really like acted as a true family, especially during the war. That I was beyond grateful. And their food was incredible. My grandpa says that the best meal he ever had in Israel was at my host family's house. It's delicious. So yeah. I see a million questions in the chat. I don't know.
Yeah,
Like Sasha has her.
I'm happy to moderate that. Steve, thank you for your service. Thank you for the question. Ira, thank you for answering that so beautifully. I'm monitoring the chat, so let's go with Lindley, and then after Lindley, we'll go to Sasha, and then we have a few in the chat that we'll go to.
Ira, I just want to say thank you so much, and Michael, Thank you so much for doing this. It's so important, especially at this time in the world for the Jewish people. Ira, thank you so much for your service and everything that you did for October 7th. That's what I wanted to say.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you guys. I see a million texts in the chat, so really thank you guys. I see all that.
I'll be sure to share the text from the chat with you after. Sasha, thank you.
Yes. Beyond Toda Rabah, Ira, and two questions. I saw one in the chat. I really want to hear about too, how you deal with your memories. But you say you went there and you became a paratrooper. Were you able to choose that? Do you get to choose where you go? And you implied like you had you were a really good shooter. Did you have that experience going in?
Good question. Just two questions. And I'll answer both. Ironically, you say I was a really good shooter. I was actually a horrible shooter. I like a horrible shot. I like, because you have to be calm when you shoot, and I guess I'm not calm. And so they gave you the machine gun because in the machine gun you don't need to be accurate. It's not a sharpshooter. You need to be strong. You need to be able to carry it, and you shoot like a bunch of hits. And you don't need to pinpoint exactly where you shoot. So I was really actually a really bad shooter.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's funny you mentioned that. But I'm probably better than most people who have not shot. I definitely. Whatever. But that's why they actually gave me. They gave me because I was a good shooter and because I could carry and strong and whatever. Your first question though, that how does it work? Choosing a unit, why paratroopers, all of that. So the way it works, if you want to do combat, the first thing you could do always is you could try out, and you could try out for special forces units. And with that, obviously, if you get into a special forces unit, then you most likely will go there because it's more, it's just a higher class unit, and if you try it out, you want to go there. Then there's this thing called, basically, it's like a rank, it's like a choice, a ranking, where for all like the regular units, you can go to it's called like a miyunin, which is like a sorting is the direct translation. But you tell this person what units you want and you rank them, and then the IDF gives you which other one you ranked. However, and I was in a very special situation because the paratroopers is the one unit that's considered like a regular unit, but we had a special tryout, and the reason is because the IDF has like a history where, the paratroopers has a history, like an esteemed history within the IDF culture, that we've always had a tryout, and we're just not going to get rid of the tryout. And it's a much shorter tryout than most others. It's really only half a day. And so I went to the paratrooper base to try out for that unit, and I ended up getting into the paratroopers, and that's how I got into the unit. However, I also ranked other units, 1 through 5, in the case that I didn't pass the tryout to get in. And so the last part of the question is well, why did I actually choose the paratroopers themselves? The reason is that I wanted to be in an infantry unit. I didn't want to be in tanks, artillery, combat engineering, or anything like that. I wanted to be your typical soldier carrying a gun, walking out to the field. And the different units have different types of cultures and different types of people who are attracted to them. In the same way that different types of students go to different types of colleges in America, same idea in the idea. And I was between Samchanim, the paratroopers, or Nachal, which are 2 units that are known for just being good places, especially good places for lone soldiers to be. A lot of support, a lot of good people. And so those are really my 2 options. And I tried out, like I said, for paratroopers, I got in, and that was it. So yeah, thanks for the question.
Thank you. And I just want to say, Steve Gerzoff, it took me a couple minutes to be able to verbalize a question because I got verklempt from your story.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, Lindley. Before we get into a few of the other questions from the chat, there's a question I think it's really good to ask right now. So someone asked, did you know Hebrew before, and did you need to know Hebrew to serve, and how did that work?
Yeah, so I grew up I grew up going to a Jewish day school and learning Hebrew all my life, but I very much learned Jewish day school Hebrew, which all of you guys know is not Israeli Hebrew. It's very different. With that being said, I have pretty high level of Hebrew. Before moving to Israel, it was a priority of mine to focus on Hebrew. When I moved to Israel, I did an Ulpan, and then also in my first 3 months of the IDF actually was at an IDF Hebrew course. Most lone soldiers, even if you have a high level of Hebrew, go to that course. It's a good way to really slowly get your toes in the waters of the army before really going into the deep end. So all of that together really propelled me for success. And with that being said, the real Hebrew I learned was just being there with the guys, with Israelis. And that's how I learned all the curse words, but also how I learned all, just the jargon of how Israelis actually speak. And the question of, do you need to know Hebrew? You do. There are a lot of lone soldiers that really should know more Hebrew. The IDF functions in Hebrew in the sense that I'm always talking English because a lot of Israelis know English, and I tend to be. They like me as their English practicer. They're like, "Ira, can I practice my English with you?" And like this thick, Israeli accent, and I end up just speaking English with them for their own sake. With that being said, the IDF operates in Hebrew. So any commands, any discussions, when we actually operate in the field, the commands are all in Hebrew. So you need to know Hebrew, and that you learn over time too. So it's a good question. All right, next question.
Thank you. So just to line people up, Marcia has a question. I believe she said she would ask it, and then if we can go with Amy and Arabella, that would be wonderful. So Marcia, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes, I just did. Thank you. Right. First of all, like everybody else, I'd like to say thank you for what you have done and for coming here and sharing your experience, because especially living where I do, we don't ever get to hear anything from the people on the ground, and certainly the BBC does not ever cover anybody who's worth listening to if they're from Israel. My question, however, and I hope you don't mind me taking you back to October 7th, you mentioned when you went, for instance, into that house and showed the video where you brought the family out, the group of you, and then you took them to a safe place. And in the midst of all that chaos that was going on and with all the terrorists running around, how did you determine what might be a safe place and where would be a safe place in the midst of all of that?
So good question. So I kind of pointed out earlier that I don't know if I was so clear. We ended up in the evening, we were in a house. We kind of enter into a house and we take that as our home, as our base for the next X many hours, depending on how long we're there. From that base, that's where we operate from. We protect that house. We make sure that no one goes into it. We have people looking outside the windows, people at the front door, whatever, making sure that's safe. What we did with many of the families, we took them from different houses in the area. We brought them back to the house that we were protecting, and that was our safe place. And sometimes we just rescue a family and take them straight outside the kibbutz, depending on what the situation was and all of that. And the other thing is that terrorists running around the area, by that time of the evening, the terrorists were very much contained to only several areas of the kibbutz. Obviously, there was always a threat of there could be terrorists everywhere, and we very much took that seriously. But at the same time, it wasn't, we weren't rescuing families when there were terrorists running all over the place. That was very much in the morning, and in the afternoon when I was there was more like that. In the evening when we were taking families out, it wasn't as like a balagan as that. Does that all make sense?
No, thank you very much for that. And again, you're all amazing for what you do and what you've done.
I appreciate it. You're in England, I assume?
I am. Not a great place to be at the moment, but nowhere is at the moment. But thank you. Yes, I am. And the information here, if it weren't for these kind of opportunities and some of the sites and what people are able to disseminate to us, very, very, very one-sided biased information coming out over here constantly.
Yeah,
So
well,
this,
I'm glad you could join us today.
yeah, this is wonderful, and if it's available on video afterwards, I can't wait to share this.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Marcia. Thanks for being here, and thanks for contributing, and then for sharing the video with others. That's much appreciated. Before we go to Amy, speaking of safe shelters and finding spaces, you mentioned that it was hard to get families out of the shelters at some points. You shared one example. Were there any that you can share that were particularly difficult and having a family have to trust you to get them out?
Yeah, it's a good question because I don't have a particular story myself, but the commander of my company, like our Mente, he's pretty high up guy, had a situation like this, and he shares it a lot. It's a pretty meaningful story. He ended up entering into a house in Be'eri, gets to the door of the shelter, and through the door, he tells the family that we're here to rescue you. The IDF are here to rescue you. The family doesn't open the door, they don't trust him. He then tells them the unit. He tells them, more about who's coming to save them, doesn't trust him. He then tells them what his name is, where he lives, where his family is from, doesn't trust him. He then says through the door his military ID number, they still don't trust him. He then finally, after several moments, decides to say through the door the Shema Yisrael prayer, which is the classic prayer in Judaism. And since moments later, there was some silence, but moments later, the family finally trusted him and decided to open the door and let them out. And first of all, the story is beautiful, right? But more than that, it shows something I think even greater. These families that day were worried. And there were many families that opened the door to people on the other side that took their lives or took them hostage into Gaza. For a family to trust, to have that trust, to know that their next door neighbor might be laying there dead, not even knowing, just knowing that there's terrorists around, to have the trust to open the door and to be that scared, to have to wait that long to finally build the trust, really shows the mindset that Israelis are in. And this story in particular is really one that, I think it's a beautiful story. But yeah, so.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Someone said that it gave them chills, and I'll second that.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Amy, if you're able to unmute yourself, you can ask the question.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I could hear you.
Thank you so much, Ira, and also Michael and everyone who can be here. Yeah, I'd love to hear about how you deal with, your memories. Maybe retelling the story helps a lot. And I didn't write this in the chat, but I'd be curious to know, if you have moments of frustration, like, a lot of us are fighting anti-Semitism in our own ways wherever we are, but what else would you like for us to do? Thank you.
Yeah, good questions. So the two questions. The first thing is, obviously I've October 7th is, I mean, it's crazy. We're nearing up on 2 years, which is a pretty mind-boggling thing. I've shared this story with so many people, and it's definitely, as far as the memory of this particular story, is one that I know how to tell very well because I've had the experience of being able to tell this story. Beyond that, though, in Gaza, I actually wrote a journal every single day, and I wrote about what I was doing. And for me, there's a few reasons why. One, we didn't do things every day in Gaza. There were many times even where we'd go into operation during the day and we'd have downtime at night, and it was something for me to do. More than that, I knew that all these little memories I'd forget over time, and to be able to write them down, to have them literally this little notebook that I keep in my pocket was a way for me to be able to remember these memories. And now, obviously, I mentioned that I've been writing a book. It's been really good for me, especially while things are fresh, to be able to write things down, to put them in a storytelling way. And one of the challenges I'm really having is I got everything down and now being able to tell a story and changing it from just like a timeline of events to telling a story. But for me, one of the big reasons I want to write this is that I knew what I went through was pretty crazy, and it was definitely a once in a lifetime, hopefully once in a lifetime experience. that to be able to at the end of this have something where I could say like this is my story, this is what happened, and to have that written down is a way that even when I'm 19 years old and living in Florida, that I'll be able to to remember. So or 80 or 82 years old like my grandma living in Florida.
Oh, amen.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Thanks for the question, Amy. Arabella, are you able to unmute yourself?
Hi, thank you so much. Ira, how has this experience with all its complexities changed you?
Sorry, what do you say?
How has this experience changed you?
This experience has changed me definitely in many ways. I'm like listen, it's an experience where definitely I feel like I don't know. It's a hard question to answer because there's many things, but I definitely feel like I've grown so much as an individual. I definitely know more about the world. I I feel like I've seen things. I also feel like, I'm in the point in my life where I'm like ready to like just be normal. I like having just a regular job now. I like having, just being with friends. I don't know. I yeah, I don't know. It's a hard question to answer, but that's kind of the first things that come to mind. Yeah.
It's actually a really great question, and I can imagine that it's very complex to answer it, especially because we're still in the thick of
Simple
it.
questions could be the hardest.
Yeah.
So I definitely need to think on that more. That's just some of the first things that came to mind.
And something tells me also from your book, you might have more to share. Things come out as you work it out in writing, etc.
And also, there's a lot more that I'm writing about that I don't talk about in these presentations. One, because of time restraints, and two, because things sometimes are better when I have the time to write it out and to really tell a full story. So, yeah.
Thank you for the question, Arabella. I'll ask a question, and then I believe it's Plia had a question as well. So I'll line Plia up while I ask. So you experienced the war week simulation and going through combat training. How did that prepare you for the real scenarios you found yourself in during the war? And how has this combat and training changed post-October 7th?
Good question. So, okay, first of all, nothing could prepare you for the actual thing, right? And we all know that. No matter what, even you learn how to be a dentist, and you don't know how to be a dentist until you open someone's mouth and you stretch their mouth out, right? You only learn by doing. The funny thing, though, is that in the moment, when we were there, I felt like I was in a training exercise, because in the field, we were in this open field, and I didn't really talk about this, but we moved to the forest area, and there were several more terrorists that were actually there that we were engaged with before the coast was clear. And when we were operating the same way that we did in a drill, months earlier, where we're lined up and like they say the command, like Ira run forward, like Ira shoot, and like the same commands, the same everything we're doing, except instead of cardboard cutouts, it's a literal person, a literal terrorist with a gun. It very much prepares you in the sense that the commands and the order and how you operate as a unit, were things that we do in training, and it goes right into the actual war. With that being said, though, October 7th was very different than Gaza. Gaza was very formulated. Every single operation we went on was very calculated in how we went about. The Air Force was involved, tanks were involved, artillery was involved, combat engineering units, OCATs, which is the dog unit that goes in and sniffs the area. Everything was involved. It was a very structured type of fighting, where October 7th was we were on the defense, and we didn't have all of that. But I definitely think the training helped. And the week before, October 7th, less so helped in the training of how to fight, and more so helped in the training of all of our equipment was together. I mentioned that I had the negative, right, the machine gun. I actually was lucky. I was special. I had two guns. I had my machine gun, which was my war gun, and then I had a regular Enfield rifle, which is my everyday gun. And in normal times, the machine gun is stocked away in a locker, collecting dust, not really being used. That week, it was clean. It was thoughtless. It was ready to go. I had all my ammunition on me. My ammunition also, I don't know if you saw from the picture, it's like a long chain. The chain has to be in place. If you have to check each chain, because if there's a bullet in the chain that's out of line, then when you're shooting, there would be a jam in the gun, and then it messes it up. So everything was ready to go. The question though, the second part of how things changed since the war started. Every 4 months when you're in your service, before the war, you would move from one place to another. You'd go for 4 months of guarding somewhere, and then you go 4 months of training. And during those 4 months of training, you continue to guard, and you continue to always protect areas of the country, but you're also focusing on training. Now, there's none of that. Everyone is active, everyone is going, and even people in courses are being sent into combat zone. A lot of the training now is literally training by action, by actually, going to operate. Even the commander's course, they send their course into Gaza as its own battalion, and they are operating. And these commanders literally switch off of who's commanders, and it's there's no better way to learn to be a commander than to literally be a commander in a war. So that's some ways that it's changed.
Well, thanks. Leah, are you able to unmute yourself?
I am. Thank you. Ira, first, I want to thank you for your service and for sharing this. Very, very impactful and moving. My question is kind of through the lens of my children. You described so eloquently what it was like in Kibbutz Be'eri when you were helping this family escape to safety. So my daughter is in camp with friends from Kfar Aza. They're the only survivors from their family, and they've shared bits and pieces. I'm wondering if your experience brought you to any other kibbutzim in that southern area. If so, was it a similar dynamic and situation that you were encountering? I just kind of wonder how that is processed by kids, and your perspective as a young adult and what you experienced, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I don't know which story I'm going to tell. But yes, okay. So we actually did have experience. We did have, we were in other kibbutzim in the area. Can you actually guys give me 1 second? I want to share something, just a map. So I want to share you guys this story. It's not a story that I share here just because there's too much to share, but I do write it in the book, but I'm going to be talking about a little bit now. When we landed the helicopter, there ended up being a huge miracle that we only found out about weeks later. Like I said, right, this is Kibbutz Be'eri. This right here is where the helicopter landed. This road is Route 232. Right over here is this community called Kfar Naiman, down below. Kfar Naiman is a religious community in the Gaza Envelope that does not have a full security team like other communities. And on that day, on October 7th, when the war was happening, they knew, that there were terrorists inside of Israel. And several members of the kibbutz, of the community, ended up going to the edge of the community right here. And they overlooked in the distance, and they saw terrorists around here, around Alumin, the same terrorists that were attacking us. And they're calling everyone. They're calling the police. They're calling the IDF. They're calling anyone, and they're saying, we have no one. We see terrorists there. They can come to us. We don't know what's happening. We need help. And what do they get in response? They get, the IDF is dispersed throughout the area. It's a mess. We don't know what to do right now. All of a sudden, in their words, they see a helicopter come out They see our helicopter get shot. They see 50 soldiers run to the field, had a fight with these terrorists from the Klein on. Basically, they were watching our story unfold in person, and the way they described it, their religious community, they said it was almost like angels fell from heaven in between us and the threat, saved us. And from there, not a single terrorist even came close to the community, and the community was saved. This story, first of all, is straight out of like I don't know, like a movie. The fact that they were watching everything that we were going through live was pretty incredible, and yeah, it's a pretty amazing story. And the other thing, while I'm on this snap, I'll just share that Kibbutz Alumin, which you can see up here, obviously, like I mentioned it a few times, on Tuesday, October 10th, we actually ended up moving from Be'eri to Alumin, and our battalion, right, the 890th Battalion, was given Kibbutz Alumin to protect. We were basically in the community, and we were told to just guard the kibbutz and whatever. Unfortunately, there were also members of the community that were killed that day. There were terrorists, obviously, dead terrorists around. There are many people also taken hostage. And so we saw the reminiscence of the battle that took place there. And we were there in the Kibbutz Alumin from Tuesday, October 10th until Sunday, the 15th. And then we moved to a training base. We were prepared for a few weeks to enter Gaza.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thanks. Let me ask Deborah if you can unmute yourself and want to ask your question.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing your story. What a story. And thank you for your service. I just wanted to ask how it was a chaotic day. Clearly it was, a surprise attack. How was the coordination between the units on the ground, paratroopers, ground forces, tanks, helicopters, special forces, police officers? How did that happen? Because
how is the communication between all these?
Yeah, the potential for friendly fire accidents, and just for, like you said,
Yeah.
it was hard to know who, if it was a terrorist, if it was what it was. So how did that coordination happen?
I'll just be honest, it's a little bit hard for me to answer that question. And the only reason I say it is because I wasn't a commander. I didn't have my phone on me or a communication device. The higher ups are the ones communicating with everyone. So I can't really answer that question fully. My job as an infantry soldier, I'm like a simple soldier, you could say. I'm a soldier on the ground, operating. I'm not really in communication with how everyone is, communicating with one another. But I'm going to focus on a few things that you kind of briefly mentioned on. The first thing is the communication with the tanks and the Air Force and all of that. I will say that one of the things that differentiated our fighting on October 7th from our time in Gaza was the level of how we would be fighting. On October 7th, we said this all the time, it was gun versus gun. It was our guns versus their guns. It was only later in the day that tanks even arrived to the kibbutz. Most of the fighting was literally my gun and against the terrorists. There wasn't communication with tanks or with Air Force. In Gaza, we had all of that, and the communication was much greater. With that being said, when there were tanks in, we had these walkie-talkie devices, and there's different channels, just like, I guess, there's different like dials. So when there was tanks, they would get on the same dials as us. And there was communication that our commanders would be on the same dials as the tanks, so that everything would be like coordinated together. I know I didn't answer like fully everything, but
You did. There were all these like the next day there were all these stories about, it was very difficult for, like, why didn't the Air Force come in? There was an Air Force base nearby. And I heard different explanations. I heard that, that because the terrorists were wearing IDF uniforms and they would see people running around, they didn't know who to shoot. It was very difficult on the ground.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know, Michael, if you have any connection with any Air Force people that it's hard for me to talk about the Air Force just because I really know I wasn't in the Air Force. I had no connection, and I had nothing to do with like how they operate. But there's definitely a lot of there's a lot of criticism on the Air Force on October 7th, and there's a lot of outstanding questions of where were they? Where were they, right? And I think it's questions we all have. So yeah, thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking that, Deborah. And Ira, thank you for your answer. I'll ask one more question because I know we've been keeping you here for a really long time. You left one battlefield and you came into another when you came back to the United States with this war on Israel's right to defend itself. So I'm wondering, as someone who served, what has that experience been like for you coming back after serving, fighting terrorists and protecting civilians, to come here and hear all these allegations and see the things that are happening on our streets?
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, it's obviously really sad. There are a few things that I think are legitimate, and I think most things are not. Obviously, there's no genocide happening. Obviously, if Israel wanted this war, if Hamas wanted this war to end yesterday, it could have ended yesterday. It could have ended, the day after. It could have never happened. I think these are all things that you hear, that really is painful to see, especially when there are hostages there, especially when, a hostage of ours from Long Island, from my own town, from growing up, is still there. It's all really hard to see. I'm also fortunate that I'm very surrounded with a strong Jewish community. I also I work for a Jewish organization right now. So I go to work every day surrounded by, people who do get me, which definitely is a very comforting thing. And beyond that, seeing in the world the hate for Israel, it's tough. I mentioned this to someone yesterday. I think the hardest thing about the West is that the West just doesn't understand the mindset of the Middle East. They don't understand the mindset of Hamas. They don't understand how Hamas operates, and that what might make sense in a Westerner's mind does not make sense for Hamas. And you see it every day. The fact that Hamas right now is underground. There are videos that came out yesterday of Hamas underground, laughing about all the food that they have, showing videos of them eating a bunch of food, where you see videos on BBC or CNN of Gazans fighting for food. And I'm sure all of that's true. And, any normal leadership would want their people to eat and would not be laughing about the fact that they have food and that their people don't. When Sinwar was killed last fall, Hamas celebrates that. They celebrate that he finally got, the hero's death that he deserved. He's going to heaven. He's being honored. That's not something that we celebrate. It's this mentality that the West doesn't understand. It's hard to come back to it. I'm fortunate to be in a community that I think gets me, that understands me. And I think our job in general is to keep talking, to keep speaking about Israel. And I actually want to answer one more question, because someone asked a double question earlier that I forgot to answer. And so I'm going to go back to it. They said, well, what can we do? And I think, what more can we do? How more can we help? And I think it's a good way to end things now. I really believe Israel is going to be fine. It's going to have its hiccups. Here in America, the way to really overcome this is to invest in the future of our Jewish community, to invest in Jewish day schools, to invest in Jewish summer camps, where the kids growing up today are really going to, we can't tell 12th graders going into college saying you need to fight anti-Semitism, you need to protect Israel on campus, if they don't grow up actually knowing why that's important and why, they should be proud Jews. Jewish summer camp, Jewish day school are the best ways to really teach, our generations growing up, not just to fight anti-Semitism, not just to fight for Israel's right to exist, but to teach them, well, why should Israel exist? Why am I proud to be Jewish? And I think if any of their dollars or if any of their efforts are going anywhere, they definitely should go to Israel, and they should definitely also go towards the community here. So that, I guess I answered that question from a while ago. So that's a good way to end it. I guess I also just want to thank you guys all. I see a bunch of messages in the chat. I know many of you guys filled out the form. I'm going to be letting you guys know about the book. I'll be in contact with Michael too, who will also, I'm sure, let you guys know. And with that, I guess there's nothing else to say aside from Todah.
And we have to say thank you, Ira. God bless you. Kol hakavod. Thank you for your service in Israel and Gaza, and also for what you're doing here. I know your family's here, and God bless them. I know they got to be so proud of you. You're an incredible human being. So thank you so much for everything, and thank you all for being here and supporting these programs. It means the world to me.